Well, hello and good morning. This is a daily update from me regarding the upcoming Board of Psychology hearings with the California Board of Psychology on December 29th through 31st. 3-day set of hearings regarding a complaint filed against me by doctors Burnett and Lorandos because of my criticism of them. And this board hearing is open to the public. I don't know the links or anything, but I recommend that the public attend. I think you'll be very interested. This directly affects you in the family courts and your children. So I suggest you attend the meeting. It's on Zoom, so it's available. You'll have to find out how and the links and that sort of thing. I suggest media attends. I think there's a great deal of interesting stories relative to this regarding the child abuse and spousal abuse in the family courts that is not being diagnosed and not being treated, and all sorts of ethical violations and things like that. I think the California state legislators and other state legislators may be very interested to hear the information that's discussed and the responses of the California Board of Psychology to the child abuse and spousal abuse in the family courts. So what I'm going to do here, I've decided to do, is as the Board of Psychology hearings approach, I'm going to do a little daily update for everybody about what's just happening and what my place in psychology might be, or various, I don't know, we'll just do daily sort of updates. What I'm starting with today is there's been a lot of sort of behind the scenes back and forth between myself and the California Board of Psychology. And so I'm going to start with a settlement counterproposal that I made. Recently, the California Board of Psychology reopened settlement negotiations after I filed a motion in limine. And I'll be getting into those sorts of things later. But they reopened the negotiations with an offer that I just couldn't accept. And so I provided them with my settlement counter offer here. And it involves 4 requirements. Basically, I have a duty to protect, and I'm asking the California Board of Psychology to accept discharge of my duty to protect obligations. And my duty to protect involves these suggested issues. So I'm transferring my duty to protect to the California State Licensing Board, suggesting that there needs to be a moratorium on forensic custody evaluations until there's an IRB review conducted, that we need remediation of professional competence 2.01 in attachment, delusional thought disorders, family systems, personality disorders, complex trauma and child abuse, that we need, I would recommend an AI-assisted VETA review of the forensic custody evaluators. That's easy to do. And the recognition and resolution of institutional betrayal trauma that's been occurring for the last 40 years. And so my counter proposal was that I would discharge those duties to the board, and their dismissal of charges would indicate that they've accepted that discharge. They're continuing to seek sanctions, so that indicates that they are not receiving my duty to protect right here. And so if they're not receiving it, then I still carry it, because duty to protect requires somebody to receive it. And so I will still be carrying that duty to protect into the 3-day hearing, and will be discharging it through the 3-day hearing. Now, the board is seeking to prevent me from discharging my duty to protect at that hearing, but we'll see what happens with that. But I will carry that duty to protect until I can discharge it to somebody. And if it's not to the California State Licensing Board, then it will have to be to legislators or through other avenues, because there's no place to protect to the children and parents in the family courts from child abuse. And that should be the California or the Board of Psychology at the various state levels. I knew that when I came in 2010, when I first arrived here. I said, holy cow, this is child abuse and no one's diagnosing it, no one's treating it. Who's responsible? And there's ethical violations 2.01, 2.04, 9.01, 3.04. Who's overseeing this? Whose responsibility is that to protect the parents and children? Licensing boards. Okay, they're responsible for ensuring standards of care and the ethical violations. And so obviously they're not doing their job. And I worked out why, and it's called institutional capture. And so then I've been working within this environment for 15 years, trying to discharge my duty to protect within an environment of institutional capture. So to begin with, just to talk about that, settlement counter proposal. I posted it up to the media press information on my website, so you can go there and you can click it, and that will give you the settlement counter proposal I made to the California Board of Psychology. And let me say something about this, that you, the general public, has an interest in this case, that this is your family, your children, your regulatory agencies, the psychologists, mental health people that treat you and fail to diagnose the child abuse and spousal abuse that's in your family. So this is a general public interest. In addition, we have a situation of institutional capture, regulatory capture, that's Stigler, and institutional betrayal trauma. That's Freud, F-R-E-Y-D. And so we have broader difficulties, and the institutional betrayal trauma, that's trauma. Okay, that's a form of trauma. I am a trauma psychologist. Okay, so institutional betrayal trauma, F-R-E-Y-D, look it up. And so that's another concern. We have a lot of now adult children, a lot of parents who lost their children who have been traumatized by the family courts, and we need to do something about that. So now the settlement proposal is up on my website. It's also, I just posted it to my blog. So my blog, if you follow my blog or you go to my blog, you can just see it right there. I just cut and pasted it basically over to my blog. So there's my settlement counter proposal, and it goes through the various discharge of duty to protect. Basically, I say, I'd like to discharge my duty to protect to you, and then Exhibit A is my duty to protect. Okay, it's a discharge. It's where I'm talking about all the difficulties in the family court. So you'll get a nice, compact little description of all the difficulties that are going on in the family courts. And I'm giving those over to the California Board of Psychology to deal with rather than me. The only reason I have to deal with it is because the institutions are failing to enforce the ethical standards of the APA, standard 2.01, 2.04, 9.01, 3.04. There's a cascade of them. Competence, use of knowledge, bases for opinions, and avoiding harm. And avoiding harm is a tough one because we have child abuse and spousal abuse in the family courts. It's not these made-up pathology labels. It's not parental alienation or parent-child Those are false, factitious labels that hide the child abuse. They are intentional facilitation of harm. Everybody needs to stop using made-up pathology labels and use the actual DSM-5 terms: child abuse, spousal abuse, delusional disorder, factitious disorder. Actual, real knowledge applied to these families. It's severely problematic when we get families, a select group, get these made-up pathology labels. You don't find that with ADHD. You don't find that with autism. You don't find that with eating disorders. You don't find that with depression or anxiety or any other type of pathology. You only find made-up pathology labels and made-up assessment procedures, these forensic custody evaluations, in the family courts. They are allowed to make up whatever they want and do whatever they want. They are allowed to disregard ethical standards because there's no oversight. There's no regulation of them. They're allowed to do whatever they want, institutional capture. So you can get that from my website or my blog. So yeah, so this is what the four categories that I basically provided to the board, saying for my discharge of duty to protect, that there needs to be a moratorium on forensic custody evaluations and an IRB review of them. They will never pass IRB review, and you'll see why when you read it. Remediation of competence to standard 2.0 in the family courts. There is pretty much universal violation of 2.01 in the family courts, and that leads into 3, which is an AI-assisted review of forensic custody evaluations. Let me say something about that. That's really easy. Board of Psychology can just request the vita of all the forensic custody evaluators. You can get them off the court lists and websites and any other places where you kind of know they're listed, AFCC membership, that kind of thing. For California, you just request the vita of the forensic custody evaluators working in the family courts. Then you run them through an AI and have the AI. You ask the AI to look at them for competence based on their education, training, and experience. Education, training, and experience on attachment pathology and delusional thought disorders. Now, you can look at other things, family systems, complex trauma, personality disorders, but those 2 should be enough. Child rejecting a parent is an attachment pathology. The differential diagnosis is a persecutory delusion in the allied parent. So, are they competent in those 2 domains based on their education, training, and experience? Okay, and the AI can do that for you. So, the California Board of Psychology can come up with a Vita review thing. I did it with my ChatGPT 4. It's called the Vita Evaluation Integrity System. It's a VEIS, and we did it with the 6 top forensic custody evaluators. All of them had no competence in attachment, no competence in delusional thought disorders, and a high involvement in the family courts. And that's a consistent pattern. I did it with 8 of them. And you can go to my website and you can see the VEIS review and the whole chat dialogue that I developed it on and uploaded to your AI. You can do it yourself. AI is here. We can start using it for a neutral, high-level analysis of information. And so then the 4th discharge has to do with the now adult children and their parents who have been traumatized by the absence of protection and by the child abuse and the spousal abuse that they were forced to endure. And they are now adults in the children's cases who are struggling with maybe identity issues and family issues and still the unresolved grief and trauma of the lost attachment bond to their parent. I've got the parents who are also dealing with traumatic grief. That's what it's called. That's a thing, traumatic grief. It's a grief that can never be resolved. And so they're still dealing with that based on the failure of the mental health system to protect them and protect their children. So that needs to be addressed. And so that's a recognition of the institutional betrayal trauma, Freud, with the now adult children and parents. So that's my discharge. Now, somebody in the authority needs to accept that that information and responsibility for that. Because right now I'm carrying it. One lone psychologist is carrying this. That's not my job. Okay. But it's been forced upon me because of the institutional capture and regulatory capture in the family courts. So if the California Board of Psychology does not receive the discharge of my duty to protect to them, then my duty to protect remains active and will be discharged through the hearing and subsequently, because I am obligated to do that. Let me say something about that too. APA ethics code is not optional. Okay, these people who just violate 2.01, 2.04, 9.03, no. And I've got obligations under 1.04 and 1.05 to do something when I encounter unethical practices by other psychologists, and that is not optional. I must do things, okay, and that's required of me. And I've got duty to protect, and I've been trying to take care of that. Now, just to show the history here, These are the notices I have made already. In 2017, I directly noticed the AFCC at a presentation to their national convention. I have a set of 6 slides. That's Exhibit 8, where I said, practice beyond the boundaries of competence. It's occurring. 2.01, 7 slides. Boom. I told them. 2018, I petitioned to the APA, signed by 19,000 parents. I hand delivered that with 2 parent advocates and said, get it to the APA Ethics Committee. They have not responded. Nothing. Zero. No response to 19,000 parents that detailed the ethical violations in the family courts. No response from the American Psychological Association. In 2025, I took a course from 6 prominent forensic psychologists that activated my 1.04 and 1.05 obligations. Let me talk about that for a second. Based on the class information, I believe there was ethical violations of 2.04, 2.01, 9.01, 3.04 by the 6 forensic psychologists. So I sent them a letter pursuant to 1.04 informal notification. They sent me a response that was inadequate. And you can see those are exhibits. My letter to them and their response back, and I recommend you look at them. And that would elevate it then to my required mandatory 1.04 obligations, which suggest notifying a National Committee on Professional Ethics, notifying institutional authorities, and licensing boards. So, based on that, 1.04, 1.05 letters back and forth, I then provided my 1.05 notice to the AFCC Board of Directors regarding this, the institutional authority. I provided a standard 1.05 notice to the APA Ethics Committee, but they said they do not review individuals, that I should until after the licensing board does. So basically directing me to file licensing board complaints. So I filed 6 licensing board complaints pursuant to 1.04 and the instructions of the APA Ethics Committee regarding violations for 2.01, 2.04, 9.01, and 3.04. Now, 2 of those are in California, Drs. Droids and Sullivan. So those are included in my defense packet relative to my obligations, and this is California. But the others, you can see them, they're up on my website and stuff, because this is a public health issue. Okay, this is child abuse and spousal abuse and ethical violations that are not being addressed, not being treated, and systemically. And so this is a public health concern. And I'm a whistleblower, and there's going to be an effort to suppress me and stop me from bringing this information to light, because all of a sudden the forensic custody evaluators lose their job, and there's all sorts of scandal about 40 years of destruction to families and what happened in the situation. So there's going to be an effort to suppress this information. That's Stigler. Now let's talk a little bit about what's happening. The institutional betrayal trauma. As I said, that's Jennifer Freud. The key article, dangerous safe havens. The definition of institutional betrayal, it occurs when an institution fails to protect those who depend upon it, responds inadequately to reports of harm, or actively enables or perpetuates harm. I will argue that is spot on what's happening here in the family courts, that this is a situation of regulatory capture, institutional betrayal, textbook case. And I will suggest that this is going to be coming into the professional discussion more and more for the next 40 years at least, as people begin to wrap their heads around what happened in the family courts. So this is not going away. We have a hearing coming up, but this is going to be a major scandal within professional psychology that's going to kind of ripple through for a period of time, no matter what happens to me. Now, they can harm me. They can try to suppress this information. They can try to stop it getting out, but it's going to get out. Okay, and that's just this situation. And right now, the California Board of Psychology is on the side of pseudoscience and ethical violations of 2.04, the parental alienation and intentional harm infliction, or facilitation. And so there's significant problems going on right now, and it's not going to end, although my involvement in the family courts might end. They may remove me from the family courts and remove the only protection being offered to parents and children in the family courts and return you back to the incompetent forensic custody evaluators and the pseudoscience. But that won't change the fact that reality is what reality is. So here's a quote from Freud. Institutional betrayal occurs when institutions people depend on for safety and well-being fail to protect them or engage in actions that harm them. I will argue that's the American Psychological Association, the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts, and the state licensing boards are failing to protect them, and they're the ones they rely on for protection. Institutional betrayal includes acts of omission and commission by an institution that betray the trust of those dependent upon the institution. So I will offer that what's occurring right now is an act of omission. They are failing to respond to multiple indicators of significant concerns. Now, I will also cite to the New York Blue Ribbon Commission on Forensic Custody Evaluations that found forensic custody evaluations dangerous, quote unquote, dangerous, harmful to children, quote unquote, lack scientific and legal value, produce defective reports, and that lead to potentially disastrous consequences for parents and children. Page 4, you can Google it, read it, page 4. There's also a YouTube where 2 of the commissioners discuss their findings. They voted 11-9 to eliminate forensic custody evaluations entirely. The 9 who voted not to do that weren't saying they were good. They were simply worried that there would be no mental health services in the family courts. So the 11 that voted for it would rather have no mental health services in the family courts than the ones that forensic custody evaluations are receiving now. That's really significantly problematic. Now, when I'm brought into a matter, I have 2 clients. I have the child and the well-being of the child, but I also have the court, because the court's making tremendously important decisions around this child, and in the context of possible child abuse by one parent or the other, the court needs the highest quality of information based for its decision, and it's not receiving that by a long shot. And it is the obligation of professional psychology to provide the court with that high quality information, and the professional psychology is failing, massively failing in that obligation to the court. In addition, we're failing in the obligation to the parents and their children. They shouldn't have to educate the mental health professionals about what's going on, but guess what? They have to educate the mental health professionals about DSM-5 and the diagnosis. That is appalling. Okay, the mental health professionals should know what's going on and should move very smoothly along the evaluation track, but it's not. The forensic custody evaluators have captured the field, and they are offering parents and the courts only their experiment in custody evaluations and quasi-judicial role. They are withholding standard of care, which is diagnostic assessment. So parents and children cannot receive a diagnostic assessment for possible child abuse. It is impossible. It is being withheld from them by the forensic custody evaluators. Somebody needs to get over here and look at what's happening. APA, licensing boards, somebody, media, state legislators, somebody needs to look at what happens in the family courts. I come out of trauma and child abuse. Okay, I'm a trauma and child abuse psychologist, not a family court person. And a classic characteristic feature of all the abuse pathologies is they isolate the victim from reporting and rescue. They isolate the spousal abuse victim, the child sex abuse victim. They isolate that victim from reporting and rescue. That is exactly what has happened in the family courts. The parents and children in the family courts have been isolated by the forensic custody evaluation experiment. It's an experiment. It's an experiment conducted on human subjects without IRB review, without risk-benefit analysis, without special protections. It is so, so bad. But they've been isolated away. They're being only given this for this custody evaluation experiment. They're being denied diagnostic assessments. The mental health people that are practicing there are in violation of competence standards 2.01 and 2.04. They're failing in their duty to protect. So that's institutional betrayal trauma. And so another quote from Freud. Institutions often respond to reports of wrongdoing in ways that silence victims, protect the institution's reputation, and perpetuate harm. And I will offer that that's occurring. That's happening as we speak. Okay, so we're actively engaged in exposing the institutional betrayal and the regulatory capture. That's why it's important for the state legislators begin to pay attention, because they have obligations to oversee the state licensing boards. So regulatory capture, the person for that is George Stigler. He's a Nobel Prize winner in economics. And back in the 70s and 80s, he developed this model for regulatory capture. And the definition is that is when the regulatory agency becomes dominated by the industry that it's supposed to regulate, and it prioritizes the interests of the regulated professionals over the public. And that is exactly what's happening. I mean, these are textbook cases. And so the moment we break the isolation of these families and get them back into regular psychology, the things are going to become scandalous. So this is a quote from Stigler. As a rule, regulation is acquired by the industry and is designed and operated primarily for its benefit. That's the forensic custody evaluations. The regulatory system has been captured by them and operates primarily for their benefit, not for the benefit of the children, parents, or courts. The regulation is not directed at public protection of the public, but at the protection of the regulated industry. Again, that's textbook for what's happening in the family courts. So I would recommend that parents, children, not parents, children, but the parents and your allies, and begin to, if you contact the California state legislators about this particular case, the one that's coming up on the December 29th through 31st. See if you can get a legislative aide to just watch, just an aide, just to show up for that and just watch that, to see what's going on in the family courts and with the California Board of Psychology, which a state legislator oversees. The boards of psychology have a mandate to protect the citizens of their state from things like dangerous forensic custody evaluations that are harmful to children, that lack scientific and legal value, that produce potentially disastrous consequences. Yeah, like that. They're supposed to be protecting parents from that. And they're not aware of what's going on because they've been isolated from reporting and rescue. These families, 19,000 parents signed a petition to the APA. No response from the APA. To 19,000 parents. What's it take to get attention into these families and children who are being abused? Child abuse, spousal abuse. This is serious business over here, destroying people's lives. And we can't get any attention to it. Isolate the victim from reporting and rescue. So there's two sets. So there's both the Assembly and the Senate, the California, and this is true for all your legislators. And you can go get your legislators to watch and get an aide from Minnesota to go watch the California hearings of Dr. Childress. And there's two that are overseeing the judiciary, and then two that are overseeing the licensing boards. So you have the Assembly Judiciary Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee, and then the two that oversee the licensing boards in California are Business and Professional Committee and the Business Committee in the Senate. Now, every state is going to have a little bit different on that, but every state's going to have roughly the same. And so this is true for every state. So not only this is relevant to California, but like Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania legislature should start to look at why the licensing boards aren't protecting the citizens of Pennsylvania from this experiment in forensic custody evaluations. Why isn't there a legislative hearing on the practice of forensic custody evaluations in the family court? New York Blue Ribbon Commission found they were dangerous, harmful to children. Have a legislative hearing about what's going on in the family courts, okay, and expose this stuff. They are responsible for protecting the citizens. These legislators represent you, and so that needs to happen. So with that, that's my morning update as to what's going on with me. I've presented this settlement counter proposal to the Board of Psychology. They have not received my duty to protect, so now we go to hearing, where I will seek to discharge it at the hearing. The board is seeking to prevent me from discharging my duty to protect there, and those are through a set of motions in line. And I'll be talking about those coming up. I filed one, they filed opposition, I filed opposition. But basically, it comes down to two motions in line. My motion in line to establish the APA ethics code as a standard and for evidentiary bases, and the board's opposition to that, saying basically the APA ethics code is not relevant to evaluating the ethical practices of a psychologist. That's an interesting statement, but that's what they're arguing. And that the truth of the criticism is not relevant to the criticism. Now, that's a due process issue because, yes, it is. Okay. If I'm criticizing these self-proclaimed PAS experts, whether or not my criticisms are true and whether or not they are required by Standard 1.05 of the APA Ethics Code are directly relevant. But we'll be talking about that. But it's important, and this is where you get the media involved on this. The licensing board is taking the sides of pseudoscience against the protection of their own citizens. They're protecting the industry, and the industry is this pseudoscience of parental alienation that does not exist. And they are knowingly withholding the DSM-5 diagnosis. They know what it is, but they're not telling everybody that's diagnosis of delusional disorders or factitious disorders. And both of those lead to child abuse. And so they are facilitating the continuation of child abuse because they're hiding the fact that it's child abuse. Okay, so that's the situation. So I'll check in tomorrow morning with new information on the situation coming forward. But this is serious. This needs to stop. The child abuse and the spousal abuse needs to stop. I'm putting my career on the line to make it stop. I've seen it for 15 years. I had to build myself up to this point, to reach this point where I could discharge it to the licensing boards, because I tried the APA, I tried the AFCC, I tried informal stuff, I tried notifying people, telling people, none of it works. So now I'm up to the licensing boards, and not even that's working. The licensing boards are refusing to protect the children and parents in the family courts. Rather, they want to protect these self-proclaimed experts in fabricated pathology. So with that, take care, everybody, and I'm going to go back to a lot of work I have to accomplish here. So, okay, take care. Bye-bye.